Hello and welcome back to the Alnwick Castle podcast. I'm Daniel Watkins.
And I'm Deborah Beecroft.
And today's episode is all about archery.
Alnwick Castle has a long history of associations with archery. In 1402, Harry Hotspur Percy won one of his greatest victories with the help of archers, only for an arrow to be the cause of his own death in battle the following year.
The castle archive includes a document known as a muster roll from 1514, listing more than 70 bowmen who were among the tenants of the 5th Earl of Northumberland. It's likely that many of these bowmen would have been part of the famous Battle of Flodden the previous year. The castle collection also includes a longbow, which has survived from around the same time.
More recently, visitors to Alnwick Castle can have a go at archery themselves, aiming to hit a bullseye with the help of our team of instructors. And throughout the season, we're joined by Andy Rice, a fantastic archer who also happens to be an expert in the history of archery.
We recorded a conversation with Andy in the artisans' courtyard area of Alnwick Castle, where he has a display set up of the equipment and weapons that would have been used, so you may hear some background noise and the occasional dragon. We were also joined for a bit by Catherine, one of our modern-day archery instructors.
To find out all about archery, here is our conversation. Please enjoy. So we're pleased to welcome Master Longbowman Andy Rice to Alnwick Castle podcast.
Good morning.
First question we'd like to ask you is, how did you become a medieval archer?
I've always been interested in history. I mean, that's always the corny phrase, isn't it? I've always been interested in history. But I've always been a bit of a history buff. But I started getting interested in medieval archery. One, because my dad, who will be listening to this at some point, so I'm going to give him a quick shout out if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Hi, Dad, you'll be listening to this. He's been an archer for about 40 odd years. He shot recurve, all competitions and things like that. But I got interested through him, and also as well because of the love of history. So when I got a bit older, as I am now, I started researching different parts of historical things like the 100 Years' War and things like that, and I thought, I love this. At the same time I was doing that, there was a guy at an archery club I was at who had a longbow, and he said, do you want to give it a try? And I tried it, and I loved it. And from that moment, that was it. The love affair started. And my dad always refers to it as going over to the dark side. So there you go. But yes, that's how I started with it. And of course, after that, you do all your research and you learn all the little nuggets. And you never stop. Mm-hmm. There's always little nuggets that you find that lead you down a different road. And it's absolutely brilliant. So yes, that's where I started.
I'd like to know why the longbow's the dark side.
My dad, it's because the longbow, originally of course the longbow is the first bow. It is what you start with. But now when you look at the competition side of bows now, if you look at recurve bows, like you have here with your trainer bows here, they're recurve bows, where you've got V-bars, sights and things like that. They're the competition bows. But my dad was always joking about it. He just said it's like going over to the dark side. So you've not got any of those things. So there you go. That's why.
One of our Have a Go archery instructors, Catherine, has just joined us.
Yes, good morning, Andy. My first question would be, what are the differences between medieval bow and a new modern one?
There are several differences. One of the ones, obviously, we use modern materials. We have modern plastics and composite bows, etc. And of course, we have metal and all this sort of thing. If you look at the bows that you're using here, they're very low poundage. Whereas the bows that we use as longbows, they tend to be much higher poundage. But it's also the method of use. If you're using the bows that you have here, you're able to lift them and pull quite easily. Whereas the longbow takes a lot of physical effort to actually get it there. As I said, there is actually this term bending in the bow that's used. And it's basically the way you bend your spine and your whole body mechanics as you actually bring it back. One of the other big differences, of course, is the bows that you use are what's called centre shot bows. Now, centre shot bows, if you look at the handle, this is why you have to be, as you often do, you turn around to people and you say, are you right, left-handed, etc., and it's your eye dominance. The reason why you do that is because you're actually shooting that arrow through the centre of the handle. Now, longbows, it doesn't matter whether you're left or right-handed, because it will actually be slightly off-centre when you actually do it, because it doesn't shoot through the centre of the handle, it either shoots to the left or the right of the handle. That's why arrows have to be what's called spined when you use longbows. Because if you have the right spine, your arrow should bend as it actually comes around the handle, bends again, and then finally goes straight. You don't see it do it. You have to slow it down to actually see it do it. But it actually is quite dramatic when you do it. If anybody's listening to this, if you go on to YouTube and you look for something called the Archer's Paradox, it's why does an arrow fly straight when it comes out of a longbow? You'll find some absolutely brilliant footage that's been slowed down using stroboscopes, and you will be amazed at just how much that arrow bends. It's really surprising, but you don't see it because you don't see it with the naked eye. So there is quite a big difference. But you're still shooting in the tradition of the same archers that shot, all those years ago, that shot on the Sundays and the feast days, and of course shot in battle.
Do you shoot right or left-handed?
I'm right-handed.
On a bow?
Righty.
Yeah,
You're a righty.
Even though I'm a
You're
lefty
righty.
for everything else, I am actually right-handed.
Yes, because it's your eye dominance. It's your
yeah.
eye dominance. Because I'm actually right-handed writer, but I'm left-handed shot.
I'm the opposite.
And
yeah.
strange enough, my dad is also a left-handed shot. I inherited his actual recurve bow, and my dad's a left-handed shot, which is strange because, of course, in the medieval period, we would be regarded as devil's archers because the left hand was not good. You were the devil's archer for that. Even up into the Victorian, Edwardian, and further, people were actually right-handed. If you were left-handed, you were actually forced to use your right hand, and it was still a thing that prevailed. So yes, we'd have been known as lefties. We would have been devil's archers. There you go.
So going back to when we draw the bow, we're using round about 16 to 18 pounds.
Right, so
how
yours
many
about 16,
pounds are you drawing back?
In my hand, in that bow that I use, is about £50.
Yes.
If you're going up in draw weights, you're looking at war bows. War bows are anywhere between 120 to 180 pound draw weight bows in your hands, and there's no letdown at all in it. What you're holding is exactly that weight. So yeah, there's a big difference in draw weight between what you have here.
You're talking about different amounts of pounds that go behind these bows. The 16 to 18 that you instruct people with, it's light in comparison, but you have to put effort in, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, we can actually see that when people are doing it. I've seen people doing it. As I recall, you had to go up my longbow, didn't you, at one point?
I did.
I think we got 2 arrows near the wall, if I
Yes.
remember rightly.
Yes, it shocked me pulling that back.
Yeah, well, that's
I'm just
interesting
not
because
used to it.
you've got a person now standing in front of you who has actually pulled both bows, and you saw a big difference in the
Yeah,
longbow,
I
didn't
did.
you? The difference in it and the technique of doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally different than
And
what you know.
we're taller than ours as well.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
another point.
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
It's all, yeah. Yeah, well, I actually heard a very good reply actually to the one, I think it was the first day we were here, and I say, why is a longbow called a longbow? And somebody said, because it's not short.
Great reply.
Which I thought was quite a good reply, actually.
I noticed a difference between ours as well. So our modern recurve bows, we've got a little arrow rest.
Yes,
Whereas
of
you
course.
don't. So,
No, I don't have that. I've got my thing called a finger.
Yeah.
I just rest it on
You just
my
go
finger.
for it, yeah.
Did you prefer the modern bow, or did you like having a go at the longbow?
I struggled with the longbow, I'm going to be honest. It's probably because of the poundage, pulling back is it 50 pounds?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm more used to the modern recurve bow. Yeah.
I think that you could get over with practice.
Yeah.
It's just practice. It's getting used to doing it in a particular way. You've got used to a recurve bow. It's like when you watch the films, you can always tell when actors or people like in any of these films have been trained on recurve bows. You can always tell because of the way they bring it up and bring it down. You can't do it with a longbow. It's a different way of doing it.
And do you do one finger over the top and 2 underneath?
I do one finger over the top, 2 underneath. Yeah.
Whereas we do 3 underneath.
Yeah, it's always made me curious.
yeah.
I think it's because it brings to the eye, which I
Yes,
think that's what
so
it
you can
is.
look right
It's
down it.
interesting. That's a field archery thing because they used to what's called string walkers, where they so many fingers on the string they can change the elevation.
And in terms of the historical research you've done and obviously continued through, how important was archery to the medieval world?
Absolutely vital, particularly to England. It is strange that it's a particular weapon that you associate with England. It is known on the continent, we know that they did so, but more in the fact that the peasantry of England were trusted, I say that in inverted commas, but trusted more with a weapon that could actually bring down nobility. Whereas if you go to Europe on the continent, particularly France, for example, they definitely didn't trust their peasantry, which is one of the reasons why crossbows tended to be used rather than longbows. Crossbows take intricate parts, you have to build them, and you can control then who you give it to. Mm-hmm. So the lord of the manor can control that. Longbows became absolutely vital to England. Obviously, Edward I saw the advantage of it in the Welsh Wars. He thought, oh, that's good. But even so, it's still a backup to the main striking force. And it's very, very interesting. The transition is amazing between Bannockburn of 1314, where England lost against Scotland. Boo. Am I allowed to say that? But yeah, unfortunately England lost. But the archers were more towards the rear of the army. They weren't used very well. And the main striking force was your cavalry, which had been all the way from about William the Conqueror's time. In 15 years, you have the Battle of Dublin Moor. Now, from there to 15 years later, the military mind had changed completely. And now, instead of that, what we did was we put our archers in a flanking position. So we have them in like an arc around you to the front of the army, and you have a man-at-arms covering an archer, man-at-arms covering an archer, and so forth all the way along, which is a hugely strong defensive position. If you can provoke your enemy to attack you, then you can cut them to pieces. You can enfilade them as they come in. And that's exactly what they did at Dublin Moor. And that proved to be a vital battle winner. And that is why it got taken to France in 3046. And you have the Crécy campaign. As we know, that was a huge victory for England. And obviously, much further on, you have Poitiers and Agincourt, etc., etc. But it became ingrained in society as well, because of the laws that brought in as well. So it was absolutely vital to the defence of the nation, if you like. And the whole thing was fostered through a series of laws that said you had to practice archery. And they're fascinating. I mean, can you imagine today somebody turning around saying, on a Sunday, and a feast day, because we don't have feast days now, but on the feast day in the medieval period, of which there were many, you are not allowed to play football. Can you imagine the reaction today that something like that would provoke? But it turned around and said, no, you must go down after you've been to church and you must shoot for 2 hours at a time. And this was a law that was passed. And people did it. And it continued all the way on to the Elizabethan period, at the end of the Elizabethan period. So it just shows you how vital to the defence of the nation it was. It was so ingrained in law that you had to do it.
And how old would you have started training?
Round about 8 or 10. Sources debate whether it was 8 or 10, but around about between the 8 and 10 mark. And you would then continue on until you were about 65 odd, because you would then you would go down to your village green, you would then shoot your arrows. At 10 years old, obviously you're taking lower poundage bows. But one of the great advantages of England doing this, and that leads back to your first question really, is one of the first things we've got to think about is the fact that when you're dealing with bows, children can only take a certain amount of poundage. But when you get to about 18 or 20, you're now shooting much heavier weight bows. And these bows, now you're talking about 120, 180 pound draw weight bows. And you have a person who can actually shoot that. It's debatable, but anywhere between 6 to 10 to 12 hours a minute out of it. You become the medieval equivalent of a machine gun. And actually, the rate of fire is unequaled up until the First World War. So it is incredible when you think about it.
You could be from any social class to be an archer. You didn't have to have a certain amount of money or land.
Generally speaking, you were yeoman. You were a free man working your land. There were two kinds of archer, though. You had what was called a levied archer, which was the ordinary man who would work the land, and in time of war, you would be brought up. You still had to practice exactly the same as anyone else did. You then had, as you would have here, you would have liveried archers. Now, when you took livery, that basically meant you came into the employ of your lord. Here it would have been the Percy family. So you would have the Percy crest. You would actually wear that. You would wear the lord's colours. And as part of that, it's called the livery and maintenance system. They would give you a bow, and they would give you a sheep of arrows. And that is yours if you're an archer. But you don't tend to come from the ruling classes. You don't come from that. You come from peasantry. And this was one of the things that was so galling to the French. When you get to Crécy, it was a real seismic shift in how things were done, because you were not from the ruling class. And that was the problem, because at Crécy, and of course as you go later on, you had peasant bowmen, or the way that they thought of them, as peasant bowmen who could bring down a nobleman at 200 yards with a peasant's weapon. That, as you'll hear me often say when I do the demonstration, is not cricket. It's not the way the game's supposed to be played. France was the home of chivalry. You have to remember that. France was the home of chivalry, and it was the very heart of it. And you were taking a peasant's weapon and using it against them. And that stung. It really did sting. And it was one of the reasons why English archers were so reviled, because you could bring down nobility. So the noble classes, they could all shoot a bow, you're quite right. They could actually shoot a bow. Henry Percy here would be able to shoot a bow as good as any man. He still practiced. He would still do it. But, of course, in the knightly sort of thing, you're looking at swords and lances and all the rest of it. But for a peasant, for yeoman work in the land, they were your bulk of an army. But the interesting thing is, if you were called up, say you weren't a liveried archer, if you got called up in time of war, you still got paid the same as an archer would normally. So you got paid 4p a day if you were a foot archer, 6p a day if you were a mounted archer. The only difference was you didn't get paid while you were tilling your land. A liveried archer did. So that's the only difference.
Do we pay you more than 4p a day?
Yes, I get 6p I can ride.
That's all right. That's all right.
I have spurs to prove it. They're on the table. Yeah, I can prove it.
We're actually in front of an archery display at the moment.
Yes, we are indeed. Yes. Well, working from the end there, you can obviously see I have the arrow board there. We have a selection of arrows that would have been used at various different periods of time. And, of course, there's overlapping periods as well. So arrows get used at, that's, you know, you're not going to turn around and say, well, this one doesn't work now, so we'll use that. That's not how it works. They overlap. So you've got things like your bodkin heads at the end there that are armour piercing and can do quite a lot of damage to people and go through mail. You've also got the likes of the hunting heads, the big broad heads. But the big broad heads were also used in battle against horse charges. And you also have hunting heads down the bottom there, which were blunt. Now, they have a very interesting history because blunt arrows, although they were used for hunting all over England, they also were the only arrows that you could use in what was called a royal forest. Now, a royal forest, the idea came across with William the Conqueror, and the whole idea was that it was an enclave where the king and his retinue could go hunting. The lords here would have it. There was a royal forest here. And by the term forest, by the way, we're talking about a wide area. The entire county of Essex at one point was actually a royal forest. So you had to feed yourself, because what happened was they turned around and said, no, we want to take the big things. We want the things like the wild boar, the deer, hind heart, etc. You can't do that. As a commoner, you're not going to be allowed to do that, because if you take it all, there's going to be none left. So we're going to preserve it for the lords and nobles. So the only thing you could use was a blunt arrowhead. It's the only thing you could use, because if you got caught with a bladed weapon, the penalties were very severe. It ranged from a large fine to being blinded to actually being executed, because you were taking against the king. You were taking the king's venison. So it was very serious. So you've got a selection of arrows there. You also have an archer's ordinary box that he would carry with him, his own personal possessions, and he would obviously have his rosary and things like that, symbols of his faith, if you like. You've also got spurs. You've got the arrow string, because every archer would carry a spare string in case one broke, which, of course, is where the saying, having another string to your bow, comes from. You would always have another string to your bow. Of course, there's another one. Always keep your string under your hat. You always keep your thing under your hat, for the simple reason it keeps you dry. It keeps the rope dry, keeps the string dry. So, you have an archer's arm guard there as well. I'm wearing one as well. You need that when you're using these powerful bows, because you can get a slap against the wrist, and it really does hurt. And it protects you. It also gives you clothing out of the way if you're wearing clothing underneath it. Now, coming down, you've also got a buckler, which was a small shield. Now, they are small, manoeuvrable shields. Now, all archers were trained in sword and buckler work, so they would be very manoeuvrable across a battlefield. And, of course, you've got the sword there, which is an arming sword of the period. And you've also got an axe. Now, axes were really useful because you could trim down stakes to stick in front of an army, but also, as well, it was a tin opener. Because if you had a medieval knight coming towards you and he had a breastplate, there's no point hitting him with a sword. All you're going to do is dent it. What you need is something that gets in the cracks and pulls him towards you. So that's where an axe comes in very handy.
And sorry, would a normal archer, would they have had all of these with them?
More or less, yeah. You have what we call commissions of array, and every 40 days or whatever it was, so you would have to appear at a commission of array, and they would actually go down like a tick box sheet. They would go, right, Jack so yes, you've got your padded jack, you've got this, you've got that, yeah, that's fine. So they have a list of what you need to have. You can have one or the other, so you might not have a sword, but you might have an axe, but you have to have at least one of them to actually do that. And of course you've got mail, which of course people in this period wear mail. Archers don't wear a lot of it though, because it's heavy. Archers generally protect their shoulders and their head, for the simple reason that if you get a cavalry charge, this is where they're going to go for. You also got obviously on my sheaf of arrows there. Average archer would be given a sheaf of about 24 arrows. In battle, you would be given another sheaf, and then you would be resupplied by your boys, etc., and things like that from the baggage train. happened. You can actually show that in the Battle of Neville's Cross, which happened later in the year in 1346. Philip of France decided to try and open up a northern front. He gets hold of David II of Scotland and says, David, old mate, you know this agreement we've had? Well, I've had this battle called Cressy. I've lost 10,000 nobles. I need some help. So the idea was to open up a northern front. Just outside Durham is where the two armies clashed. And you have these being used. And you can actually show, and the records show, men and monks, old men and monks and boys, shuttling backwards and forwards with arrows to give to the archers as they were doing it. Which, of course, England won, by the way, just to put the point. You've also got, of course, spare pair of shoes. I'm wearing my boots at the moment, but you always have a spare pair. And you've got a bottle, which could also have wine in it, etc. You tie that to the pommel of your horse, or you even carry it yourself. You've got your helmets, 2 helmets. You've got one from an earlier period and one from a later one. You'll notice that the later one's actually got a curve at the back that stops swords coming towards you at the back of your neck. It actually tries to protect your neck. And you've got the padded jack underneath. Now, padded jacks, many men at arms, archers, etc., would wear padded jacks. The reason behind it is because as an archer, I paid 6p a day. I'm not going to have anywhere near enough money to buy a suit of armour. No way am I going to get that. So what do I get? Well, I have my defences, which is my padded jack. And it's actually quite useful because it's quilted. So like quilting actually bunches material together and makes it much denser, which means if somebody comes to you with a sword, it can actually turn that sword blade. And they actually developed, they ended up as what we call jacker plates. Sometimes they wear what's called brigandines, which have metal plates inside them. There are various different types. But they're all cheap armour that you can make yourself. The metal plates would have come off old armour that you could cut up and things like that. And coming down, we have all our surgical kit as well. Yeah, our gentleman there, that's the very young Prince Hal, with his arrow sticking out of his face. Battle of Shrewsbury, 1403, is the tale of two Henrys. You have Henry Percy, who is on the big statue outside of here, who is astride his horse, and of course Henry Percy is in rebellion against Henry IV. The whole Percy family is. It's all to do with ransoms. They got annoyed because Henry IV insisted on having all the ransom money from the Battle of Homildon Hill, which was a year before that. The Percy family decided, no, we're not having that. So they went on O England, our side. So the Battle of Shrewsbury, the gentleman out there, on astride his horse, leads a charge, tries to open his visor up to get a breath of fresh air to see what's going on, because it's very confined, and a full-face shot hits him, straight in the face, and he's dead. Yeah? Remember what I said about nobility being brought down by a weapon? There's a good way of doing it. Now, it just shows the point. Prince Hal here, he's obviously on the king's side, on his father's side, he gets a deflected shot. It comes from a helmet, so it takes some of the energy out, but it's still enough to drive the arrowhead very deep in. He was extremely lucky. It just entered just below his eye. It actually more or less nearly touched his spine. But it didn't. He managed to actually survive. Believe it or not, he actually fought on in a battle. He inspired his men. He fights on the battle. At 16 years old, he's a big strapping lad. He gets taken off to Kenilworth Castle. They managed to get, at the end of it, the arrow out, the arrow itself out, but that left the head. They couldn't get it out. So they called on a guy called John Bradmore. Now, John Bradmore was a very good surgeon. He'd actually been surgeon to the royal family, but he's well known to them. He was brought in, and he devised a method by which he could open the wound up. So he dips these, what he called tents. You can actually see them there, the little wooden pieces with the linen round. He actually dips that in honey and puts them in the wound, and he starts opening the wound up. Yes, I can see you shivering at just the thought of that. Sorry. Yes, it's incredible. Bear in mind, this is over a few days. He opens the wound up, and he gets bigger and bigger. He uses bigger and bigger probes to actually open up. Eventually, he gets to the point he can actually see the arrowhead, but he can't get it out using traditional forceps. You can't get in there. It's too big. There's not enough space. He then designs his own instrument, which actually is this. His one actually had a hand screw on it. This one's a later version, which is hand-powered. But instead of the forceps going outwards, coming downward towards the thing itself, these open that way out. So what you do is you can actually get your arrowhead. You slide these into an arrowhead, like so, into the face. Now, bear in mind, he's actually doing this completely blind in the man's face. And he actually says, by the grace of God, I believe it located. So this is your surgeon talking. And he actually closes over. And it's gripping the inside diameter of the arrowhead, of the arrow shaft. And he actually manages to bring it straight out. And it gives a little wiggle, and then he comes straight out. He then treats the wound with all the things that we've got here, cleans out with white wine and vinegar, and then packs it full. Even today, now it's funny how things come back to us today. Even today, on big wounds, we wound pack today. So, and then gradually we use less and less wound packing. He did exactly the same thing. And essentially, after a time, he was able to stitch it shut. And he would actually then, he retired quite a wealthy man, having written 2 books on the subject. The young Prince Hal, we also got lucky, because young Prince Hal took over from his dad when his dad died and became Henry V of England, of Agincourt fame.
Who used archers very well.
Of course he
the
did,
French.
yes. Interestingly, the person who would have shot him would have been a Cheshire archer. Because the Cheshire archers were on Owen Glendower's side, and I actually hail from Cheshire. So there you go. Rebels to a man, there you go. But yes, the person who shot him would have been in Cheshire. So, yeah.
So that's a good example of how deadly archers could be.
Oh,
they got rid
doubt.
of Henry Percy Hotspur.
Yes, that was a full face shot. It just shows you the difference between a deflected shot and a full face shot. A full face shot, it would have gone straight through. No two ways about it. The power of the longbow itself, it has a devastating effect. And not only is it devastating in the fact of what it can do, you don't have to kill a man to actually get him out of a fight. If you disable him in some way, if somebody actually breaks their arm, for instance, that will actually do that. It will actually bring him out of the fight because he can't hold a sword, can't hold a lance, etc. But the effect of archery is also psychological. Because, yes, like the guys at Agincourt, the French knights who had to slog up that hill, they've got their heads down because they don't look up because the arrows are coming up and in and actually could get into the eye slits of their visors. So they've got to keep their heads down. They're trogging through mud. That mud is cloying mud. If ever you've been to France where the Somme actually is, if you look at the photographs, obviously, of the First World War, the battlefield, that gives you an idea what the mud was like. It was totally different than Cressy's mud and the earth of Cressy. So they're slogging up there. Now, psychologically, you may have faith in your armour. They had good armour, these guys, and it could repel quite a lot of archery and longbows, etc. But when you're being hit by 5,000 archers who can all loose around about 50,000 arrows a minute, that's 833 a second. If you've got faith in your armour, it's still going to be, am I going to get hit on the next one? Am I going to get, because the 10th one might not get through. What about the 20th? What about the 30th? What about the 50th? And each one is hitting you, and it's psychological, and it bunches you together because psychologically you're trying to get away from it. Yeah. Which also has a great effect. It's scary.
In terms of shooting distance, how far could a longbowman?
A longbowman can actually shoot. A longbow will actually shoot about 400 yards, but effective killing range is about 200. Henry VIII actually made a bit of a law that's actually said that every man must be able to hit a man-sized target at 200 yards. He could do it, so he decided nobody else could. He was a very large exponent, as you might have guessed, of archery. He really was.
Going back to the actual bow and the arrows, what materials is your bow and your arrows made out of?
Right, well, the traditional one, of course, is yew, which you would use for the longbows, for ones, but we don't use that for our bows for here because we have multiple people actually trying it and playing around with it. So my bow is actually hickory. It's made of hickory, and it's more forgiving for that people are maybe slightly over pulling it. So mine, but my arrows are ash, which is specified in Toxophilus, which was a guy called Roger Ascham, who wrote the book, of course you will know about this, who wrote the book on archery. Now, Roger Ascham was actually Henry VIII's tutor, who's his archery tutor, and he became Elizabeth I's tutor as well. And he wrote this book called Toxophilus, which actually stands for the love of the bow. That book is still in circulation today. It is literally the archer's Bible. He tells you everything, what you should do, what bow woods you should use. He looks at poplar, aspen, ash. He looks for arrows. He looks for different bow woods. He tells you everything you need to know, basically. And it's considering it's over 500 years old.
So with yours being made out of the hickory, do you still have to warm it up before you use it?
Yes. Yeah, I still warm it. Yeah, I still warm it. Yeah, you need to warm it up because otherwise it's too much of a shock to the wood. When you're doing it, so you very gently. I mean, I only have to warm it up for a few seconds. It's just a case of just gently pulling it and then pulling it back and pulling it back until you get to full draw, and then you do that a few times, and your wood is used to it then, and that's what you've got to get used to. But going from a cold start like it would be this morning, you've got to do it a few times to get it to be ready.
Our bows are not made of wood. But they still need maintenance. They still need to be looked after, don't they?
They do, yes. And our arrow is totally different as well. So ours are aluminium with a plastic fletch.
Yes.
What's yours made out of?
Mine are all ash with goose feather fletchings.
Goose feather, yes, goose feather, yeah.
Yeah, and all bound and glued, etc. Yeah, and of course the arrowheads on them as well. Yeah.
Has the language of archery affected any other modern terms? You mentioned a couple of sayings before.
Yes, we have seen sayings brought in. Have you ever heard the term playing fast and loose? Mm-hmm. If somebody plays fast and loose, they're playing a very dangerous game. The word fast means stop in archery terms. So if somebody does something and you're on an archery line and you're shooting, if somebody shouts fast, you stop instantly. Loose, of course, is when you loose the bow. Well, if somebody was playing fast and loose, that was quite dangerous because they'd be running in and around the targets and you were playing fast and loose. You would be trying to get your arrows away. So in fact, that's one example, fast and loose. Names come back to us, our surnames, the people who actually made these things. You've got Fletchers, who made the arrow itself and put the fletchings on. You've got the arrowsmith, who made the arrowhead. You've actually got the bowyer, who made the bow. And you've got the string fellow, who made the string. So these are all guilds. People belong to guilds, industrial guilds, and they made these things. And of course, eventually they became our surnames. So things change. And of course, we have all these things that come to us from the past. So we actually still live with that. Even our thumbs up symbol is still from that. Because if your bow broke in battle, you have to restring a bow. Well, bows, although they tend to be about 6'5" odd, there may be a slight variance depending on who makes them. So your string is looped on one end and knotted on the other. You have a bowier's knot. So you'd very quickly put your loop on, tie your bow, and then you would use your thumb at the back of the bow to the bowstring. And you want it about 6 inches, which is roughly that, with your thumb, a clenched thumb. So all these things come back to us.
And was there a different style of archery if, for example, on a battlefield or somewhere in a castle like here, if you had archers on defensive, was there a different style of archery?
No, the archery is just the same, exactly the same. But of course, not only did, of course, people practice because it was enforced by the law, but people used it for hunting. And one of the things that you find is that one of the strengths of the English armies against others is the fact that we use things that people already knew how to use. Every peasant, every yeoman knew how to use a bow. You went hunting with it. Every person knew how to use one. Every person knew how to use what was called a billhook. If you look at a billhook, it's an agricultural implement. You use it for hedging. It was used extensively by men-at-arms and armies at the time. So you have these weapons that people already know how to use. The only thing you've got to train them to do is use it as a military unit. It's not like it's new technology or anything like that. Whereas, if you look at the continent, they actually had to start employing, like the French did at Crécy and in other battles, crossbowmen from Genoa who were well trained at what they did and they were very elite people, but they had to employ mercenaries because they didn't have enough people trained to do that. So it just shows you the strengths and weaknesses of things.
Just to our right, we can see that you have accomplished with 2 arrows what you call the Robin Hood shot.
Yes.
Can you tell us about the Robin Hood shot? He is maybe England's most famous archer.
Yes, of course he is. Yes, indeed. It's called a Robin Hood shot. It's just a term that's used for it because Robin Hood was supposed to have been able to shoot at the competition that the Sheriff of Nottingham creates. He turns up disguised as an old man and everybody thinks he's rubbish at archery, etc. He picks a bow up, he throws one arrow at it, loses one arrow, hits the target, and then with the next one, splits that one all the way down. So it got the name of Robin Hood shot. Robin Hood shots, as you can see there, you've got one arrow that goes into the target, and the next arrow that follows it is in direct same path as that one is. So when it hits the back of it, in theory, it will split it all the way down. Mine actually doesn't split, thank heavens, because I've actually bound them to make sure they don't. They're actually bound at the knock end, which we do to actually reinforce that. If you look at arrows themselves are a huge piece of technology because certain arrows, lighter arrows like we use here, they're actually bound with string to actually stop the knock splitting from the power of the actual bowstring hitting it. Because if it's doing it time after time after time, wood is a natural fibre, so it can actually split. If you look at the Mary Rose bows, which are the only extant actual arrows that exist now, if you look at those, they have a horn insert actually at the knock end to reinforce it. So you have the knock cut at one way, and at crossways to that, you have a horn insert, which is also made to the size of the knock to actually reinforce it. But of course, Henry VIII's flagship, you got the best of the best of the best, didn't you? You know. So there you go. And of course, longbows, the actual longbow itself, although we talk about longbows of England, shall we say, actually they're not. They're the longbows of Italy, Spain, Portugal, because they were the places we got them. Mm-hmm. Because longbows such as this, our climate here, although you can make any kind of bow out of it, the war bows with the strength you need, that 180-pound draw weight bows that, like you found on the Mary Rose, all of those are Italian yew. They're all Italian yew for that, and you'll find Spain and Portugal, places like that, anywhere where you can grow above 3,000 metres, and you're looking at nice straight grain, strong grain. So you need the strength of the bow, and that's why you use that yew. A lot of people will turn around and say, well, that's what we had yew trees. We put them in churchyards, and that was to supply the bows. That's another little myth. No, we didn't. There's a reason why we put yew trees in churchyards. It's because when you put your relative in there who's just died, when you go back, you don't want to find them dug up, because the actual leaves for a yew tree are poisonous, and it would actually stop things like foxes and carrion, etc., trying to get your relative out of the ground. That's what it was about.
You learn everything on this.
We do our best.
You've talked quite passionately about archery, and you've said that you love it, but what is it specifically that you love about archery?
To be honest with you, having shot both modern and this, what I love about this, and I suppose that's probably what my dad said about the dark side, is the fact that it's you and a piece of wood and a string and something to come out of it. That's it. There's no bells, no whistles. It's your skill. At the end of the day, it's you that's got to get this right. And that is a real challenge. It's also the fact, I mean, anybody can pick up a bow and use it. But as Bernard Cornwell actually says in his books, actually mastering it is a lifetime. It really is. And I love that challenge. I love the ability. And I actually love that thwack sound when it hits the bow. It's also great because you know that it's actually hit the target. You're not having to run around the grass trying to find it. Because if you ask any longbow archer, that's one of our banes of life, is trying to find your arrows. Because when they go into grass, they fold up.
Right.
Literally, the fletchings just fold up and they just vanish, as any archer will tell you. So that's one of the things. But yes, I love doing it for that reason. It's a challenge at the end of the day. And also as well, not being funny about it, but when I pick that bow up, you feel it. You really feel that this is the past you're shooting here. This is the tradition. This is what people used. And you are shooting exactly as they did in the past. And it's a real thrill. You get that little thrill up your or at least you do if you're me, anyway.
And how many arrows per minute do you think you could?
I've got 12
Ooh.
timed. My daughter timed me. Could I keep that as a sustained rate of fire with a large longbow? Probably not. But then there's a lot of evidence that says that wasn't what was required, because a cavalry attack, which is particularly what you're against, would come in waves. So they would be able to shoot the first act. They would get at least a bit of a breather between the two. Because one of the problems that you get when you're shooting rapidly like that is lactic acid builds up in your muscles. But of course, these people, again, we talk about that because we're not used to it. Those lads had got used to it over so many years, and they were able to get past that. But even so, there comes a point of exhaustion. There really does come a point where you have to say, no, I can't do anymore.
What do you love about archery?
Teaching people, for those who think they can't do it, it's actually quite easy, yeah.
Yeah.
Once you get, I'd say about 4 little points right, your stance, the right eye closed, how you draw back, it's actually really easy.
Of course, you guys have the advantage that your target is very close to you.
Well, we are a short range, yes.
One, it's close to you. Two, it's not moving, which is another point. But yeah, the longer distance you go, the more difficult it actually becomes, because you've got to get your elevations right and all that sort of thing. Which, interesting, is where roving comes from, because what they would do, as well as practicing the way they did with the longbow on the Sunday or feast day, what you would do is go out in fields, group of lads, and they would shoot for the nearest target. So that target might be a tree. Whoever gets to the nearest one or actually hits it, then he nominates the next target. Well, that might be over a river or something like that. Yeah. So what you do is you're training your eye to get used to distance shooting and different terrain and that sort of thing. And that gradually becomes the sport that we have now of roving.
And if people have listened to this and they want to find out more or try it themselves, where do you suggest people go?
Best place to look, if they look online, if they find the nearest archery group, and they would go there if they want to do that, because all archers must, if you start with archery, have to do a 6 weeks beginner's course. That's basically standard. The reason being because once you do that, you get what's called your GNAS at the end of it, which is the Grand National Archery Society of England. Well, Britain, actually. What they do is they license clubs to be able to actually do this, and your insurance covers you when you're actually on there. So when you pay your dues to your club, you're also paying for your insurance as well. But you do have to do that course because it's still, safety at the end of the day. You learn all the safety things, etc. But yes, I would advise anybody to do that, to get in touch with a local archery club.
Brilliant, thank you.
Well, Andy Rice, thank you very much for joining us today on the Alnwick Castle podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me to do it. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much indeed.
If you'd like to see one of Andy Rice's demonstrations here at Alnwick Castle, please visit our website for full details of future appearances. And if you'd like to have a go at archery yourself during your visit, our team would be very happy to teach you. Just head over to our archery arena in the castle grounds.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes in the future, please subscribe, and we'd appreciate any reviews or ratings you can leave for us on your podcast platform. If you've got anything you'd like to know about the castle, please send in your questions and we'll answer them on our upcoming 50th episode.
The Alnwick Castle podcast will be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I've been Deborah.
And I've been Daniel.
Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
Bye.